Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Radiant Central, and I'm your host, Josh St. Michael, and thank you so much for joining me. So last week I did a video showing how to make coconut palm sugar syrup, and since then I received a few emails from people asking me what my opinion is on different sweeteners and sugars on the market today. What do I use? What do I recommend? What do I stay away from? And also someone wrote me asking me how the coconut palm sugar syrup is in comparison to agave nectar. And they mentioned that I did a video a few years ago talking about how my body didn't react very well to agave nectar, and I pretty much avoided it as much as possible. And they were just asking if the coconut palm sugar has been a better alternative. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the video. So just starting off about natural sweeteners. I have to say, you know, if you're gonna go for anything that's sweet, I would highly encourage to go with fruit. Fruit first. Fruit is a whole food, it's a real food, and it's got a bunch of other great things in it besides its natural sweetness. So one thing I try and do is that when I have a sugar craving, I try and go towards eating fruit first, and if I still crave something sweet, then I might have something sweet afterwards. But really, I find I try to just sort of get my sugar fix from fresh fruit, or from dried fruit too. So that's something to try and get into, you know, try and get into the habit of going towards whole foods as opposed to a sweetener, even a natural sweetener. Okay, always going with fruit is always the best. And one thing that I can suggest too for those that like to bake, try using really ripe bananas instead of a sweetener in your baked goods, or homemade applesauce. That can be a great alternative to sugar. Or even just if you have to, why not cut the amount of sugar you use in half, and the other half use ripe bananas or applesauce in your baking, because that can make a big difference, and you add a little bit more nutrition into your food, and it'll be even more substantial. It'll keep you fuller longer as well. So that's something to try. And also with dried fruit, something you can try making is a homemade date syrup using fresh dates, and that too can be an alternative to things that you buy at a store that's pre-made. And therefore, again, you're using a whole real food. Now, when it comes down to buying a sweetener, what are the things that I use, or what would I recommend? Well, I like to use honey. That's, I would say, one of my favorite sweeteners, and always prefer a raw honey over a pasteurized one. With the raw honey, you're going to get a lot more nutrients from it because it hasn't been heated. And one thing I can say is sometimes people think that with the raw honey, it's got to be crystallized, you know, and in order for it to really be raw honey. And that's not always true. I found from living in Southeast Asia in a very hot climate is that with the honey, it actually can take over a year for the raw honey to crystallize. And so a lot of times when we buy raw honey here, it's totally liquid. And it doesn't mean it's been heated at all, or filtered or anything. It's just that what comes out is a liquid form of honey, whereas in colder climates it crystallizes pretty quickly, and it depends where it's been harvested, all of that. So don't think that because you found a honey and it says it's raw but it's liquid form that it's not, because it could very well be. Okay, and so I highly recommend, if you're going to eat honey, have raw honey. Another sweetener that I use living here in Southeast Asia is the coconut palm sugar, or otherwise known as coconut sugar. Here it's the local sugar that they use. And it still does have some nutrients in it. It is, some people say, consider it low glycemic. I don't know if any sweetener really out there is all that low glycemic, especially any kind of sugar or syrup. Usually, even though they say it is, it might not be. You can kind of tell by the taste. The more sweet something is, the higher glycemic it's obviously going to be. And with coconut palm sugar is that depends on the variety. You know, living here, I've tasted many different coconut palm sugars, and some of them are super sweet, some of them are not at all sweet. So it really depends on the variety that you're getting. I like using it because it's a local product, and I use it, I would have to say, mostly for savory food. I use it in cooking. A lot of Southeast Asian dishes use coconut palm sugar. So and in their savory stuff, like making curries and different sauces, you don't use very much, but just a little bit to bring out the flavor. So I do use coconut palm sugar, and when I lived in Canada, I used maple syrup because that was a local product there, and maple syrup too has quite a few minerals in it as well. And so I like to stick with local ingredients. Not only is it more cost effective and cheap, but you're also supporting local businesses and local people and the local industry. So those are sweeteners that I go with. A few things that I liked while I was living in Canada and had more access to international foods and products. I liked using lucuma powder. I would have to say when I lived in Canada, that was one of my favorite sweeteners, was lucuma powder. And it comes from a fruit from, I believe, South America, and it's a dried fruit. It's a fruit that's been dried and powdered, and I really like the taste of that. I also like mesquite powder, which comes from a pod. And those, again, too, are a whole food. It's just been dried out and then powdered. And so I enjoyed using those. And I also used to use stevia many years ago. I don't like the taste of it nowadays, so I don't really use it here and there, maybe. I always use the green stevia, where it's not as refined as the white one, because stevia comes from a green leafy plant. So therefore you'd be looking out for the green powder, not the white powder, because that's just been highly processed down. And the good thing about stevia is there's no calories in it. So it's a good sort of non-calorie sweetener, but it does have a funny taste to it, or an aftertaste to it, and you have to use very little of it. And some people don't mind it, other people can't stand it. I used to not mind it. I don't really use it anymore. I find that in general, it's kind of like if I crave something sweet, I gotta just have something sweet, because if I have sort of the non-calorie alternative to it, I'm still hungry afterwards. I'm not satisfied by it. And in fact, I find sometimes it kind of triggers me to have an even bigger sweet craving, because it's not as satisfying as having what I really want. And sometimes just by having a little bit of what I really want, then I can move forward and move on from it. Whereas if I have an alternative that's not so great, then I'm thinking more about what I want, and I want to have more of it. So I find in general, I prefer to actually be eating the real foods and whole foods, as opposed to things that are non-calorie alternatives. Even though stevia is natural, for me, it's never worked. And some people out there question too whether, even though it's non-calorie, does it spike people's blood sugar? And there's a possibility, because it's so sweet that it might actually trigger sort of a physical spike in one's blood sugar because of the taste. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not a biochemist. I can't tell you if it does or doesn't, but that is theories out there. So other sweeteners too that are on the market is yaccoon syrup or molasses. I find yaccoon syrup and molasses, the thing about it is that they're not that sweet. And if you like the taste of it, or you're using it, I would say more for the taste as opposed to sweeten something. Me, I like to use the molasses once in a while to sweeten certain things. I find it gives a nice rich taste to certain baked goods I like to make. I call for it. It has a lot of minerals in it, so that's something I use. And the last thing that's on the market is xylitol, and I don't know so much about it. I haven't really experimented much with it, and again, it's also a very low or non-caloric sweetener that a lot of people do really enjoy using it, so that's something to try out too. In general, those are the sweeteners that I would go towards using. The sweeteners that I do like to stay away from is high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. For me, those are the things to stay away from. High fructose corn syrup is just bad news. It's very high glycemic, and it's very high in fructose. And nowadays, more and more, there's more information out there saying that, things that are very high in fructose can be quite detrimental on people's health, and high fructose syrup has been linked to just a lot of problems. So in general, I listen more towards what goes on with my body and how my body is reacting to certain foods or certain sweeteners, and I've never done well having foods that contained high fructose corn syrup. And the same goes with agave nectar. I never did well whenever I had foods that were made with it, and I've always had to stay clear of it. Nowadays, they've come to realize that agave nectar too is very high in fructose, as much fructose as high fructose corn syrup. So perhaps that's the reason why it's never agreed with me. So I stay away from those two, and I stay away from artificial sweeteners like Splenda or NutraSweet, things like that. I find is not good on anyone's digestive system. And again, I find when people are eating non-caloric sweeteners, a lot of times it makes them have cravings for more and more sweet. So I stay away from those. Now, when it comes down to sort of basic sugars like table sugar or white sugar or brown sugar. I don't really use those things, but I have to say that I like to cook, okay? And I like to cook for my family, I like to cook for my husband, and I like cooking and making things from scratch. I make condiments from scratch, I make everything. I like to make like whole, fresh food, right? And I enjoy it, and I enjoy making healthy food for me and my family. And so my husband's not very into eating healthy food, but he loves my food. And I figure if he's going to be eating certain foods that contain high fructose corn syrup or contain hydrogenated oils or MSG and food additives and flavor enhancers and all that crazy stuff, if he's going to be eating it and I can make it, I might as well make it. And so things like sweet chili sauce, I make that at home. It's so easy to make. And yeah, it's using white sugar, but if he's going to be eating it, I'd rather him be eating the stuff that's not made with the high fructose corn syrup and the hydrogenated oils and MSG and all that. And so I make these things at home. Same thing goes with tomato sauce. I don't make tomato sauce very often, like tomato pasta sauce. I think I maybe make that like once a year or something. But when I do put a pinch of white sugar in it to take away the acidity of the sauce. And compared to what you're going to get from jarred tomato sauce, which is known to have tablespoon after tablespoon of plenty of white sugar in jarred pre-made tomato sauce, you're way better making these sauces at home. And if you have to add in a bit of sugar, a pinch or two, it's way better than getting the stuff that's been pre-made. So that's my view of it. I'd like to pretty much have a balanced view when it comes down to what I'm making and with the sweeteners and stuff. You know, the main thing is fresh is always best. Making things homemade from scratch is always, always, always best. The moment you buy something that's been processed, it's going to contain a crazy amount of sugar, a crazy amount of sodium, a crazy amount of preservatives and flavor enhancers and all that crazy stuff. So it's way better, it's healthier route to always go with fresh. And even if you have to add in a bit of sugar, not a big deal. So that's generally how I do things. And with the question in regards to the agave nectar in comparison to using coconut palm sugar, I think there's a big difference. Personally, I don't react to coconut palm sugar like I did with the agave nectar. But again, I don't use so much. Whenever I've had agave nectar too, I have to say it was always when I went to like a raw food restaurant or went to the health food store and I was given or I bought a dessert that was made with agave nectar. I never made things with agave nectar, so I never really had control as to like how much was put into it. But whenever I had any kind of dessert that was made with it, I never felt good. I always felt like I was jumping out of my skin after eating it, and I felt like I needed to go home and sleep it off. I didn't feel good. And I found with making things with coconut palm sugar, never had that issue, especially because it's not a very sweet sugar and it's more used for the sort of caramelly flavor. And usually when you're using coconut palm sugar, a lot of times what it's traditionally used with is a lot of coconut and things like that, and foods that have fiber in it, that have a lot of fat in it and protein in it, and that also helps in sort of in conjunction with the coconut palm sugar to sort of balance out your blood sugar. You know, if you're having the coconut palm sugar with a bunch of coconut, the coconut's really going to help to sort of slow down the absorption of the coconut palm sugar and the sugar inside of it. So I find in general I've never had any kind of bad reaction to it. But I would say to anyone that is very sensitive to sugars, and I'm one of those people, is to be mindful with the sugars and what you're having and how much, and to know your limit. And I would say too is try your best to stick more with fresh fruit as opposed to any of the sugars on the market, because you will do much better having that as opposed to a sugar which can give your body much more of a hit because it's refined, all right? No matter how healthy it is, it's still a refined product. All right, so yeah, so that's my whole thing on the sugars. And I just want to mention too, because I have received a few requests about with the video series on coconuts, right? I did last week and the week before I did a bunch of videos showing how to open up a mature coconut and make coconut butter and a curry using coconut milk and how to make coconut milk and cream and all of that. I received a few requests to make coconut yogurt and also to show how to make coconut flour. And I can actually even show you guys how to make coconut oil, the traditional Balinese way of making coconut oil. And I'm going to be putting these videos together and working on it in the next few weeks. So I have received these requests, and thank you very much for posting the requests, and I'll be putting things together for that. And I want to mention too that the next 10-day juice fasting program, it starts this coming Tuesday, May 13th. Perfect time, it's springtime, so this is a great time to do a pre-summer cleanse. If you want to do a 10-day juice fast and do it as a group, this is a perfect program to join. Experienced fasters are welcome. New beginner fasters are definitely welcome. And it's a great program. It's an online program. You can do it from anywhere around the world. And it's 10 days of juices, and once you sign up to the program, you get the outline for the juice fast, plus also an outline of a transition diet onto the fast and also to break the fast. Plus, you get access to an online forum, so you get to connect with everyone doing the juice fast with you. There's juice fasting videos, which are about 20 to 40 minutes long, and they're daily videos, and they walk you through everything you need to know about the juice fast and the cleansing process and all of that. And that is 10 videos for the 10 days of the juice fast, and it helps. It gives extra motivation and encouragement. And also, I'm always on the forum every single day answering any questions, or if anything comes up, I'm always there to offer some additional motivation and support. So if you're interested in doing a 10-day juice fast, go to my website at radiantcentral.com, click on products, and you'll see 10-day juice fasting program there, and there's a bunch of information on it, and you can sign up there. All right, so have a super fabulous day, everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.